In the current era of huge battle royale lobbies and endless free-to-play RPGs littering the store, it's hard to imagine that during the 7th generation, the word MMO was basically unheard of on consoles. Before experiences like Fortnite, Elder Scrolls Online and PlanetSide were common, it's easy to forget that back in 2010, multiplayer lobbies rarely exceeded 60 players, and the list of MMOs on either console could be counted on one hand. With the multiplayer landscape being dominated by a list of Call of Duty style lobby shooters, console fans were looking for something more, something to raise the bar for console multiplayer. And that innovation would come from the most unlikely of places, Sony's own first party. By this point, Sony was struggling to find its feet again. After the PS3's rocky launch and the breakout success of Xbox's online service, the company was struggling between the changing market and realising their focus as a single player focused company. Though series like Uncharted, Resistance and Little Big Planet were finding success, they weren't the online breakout that the company was hoping for. Though Sony were arguably delivering far more exclusives, with releases like God of War, Heavy Rain, Folklore, Sauron Blood Curse and Demon's Souls, all eyes were online, and Sony just didn't have a Halo or Gears of War to call their own. But Sony had one developer in its ranks, one who had a focus completely separate to the rest of Sony's teams. Enter Zipper Interactive, a first-party Sony studio hailing from Redmond, Washington. See, when I said that Sony had never had a breakout multiplayer success, I may have missed out one franchise in particular, the PS2 tactical shooter series Socom, the series that practically birthed online multiplayer on the PS2 back in 2002. Zipper's US Navy SEAL series changed multiplayer on Sony's legendary console, from a novel idea to something genuine to consider, and with the sequel the following year, they nailed the formula, creating the most successful multiplayer experience on the console's fledgling online service. Sony's first real claim to fame in the online space, its servers remained open until 2012, 6 years after the PS3's launch. If any studio would be able to deliver a premier online experience for Sony's console, it was Zipper.
You have been downtrodden. You have been abandoned. Now is your time to rise up out of the oppressed, to emerge from the shadows. Ignite the thunder of freedom. Now you fight for yourself, for riches, for honor, for the brotherhood.
The ATAC 2000 is the latest in assault rifle technology, capable of up to 800 rounds. Training complete. Congratulations, operative.
Join these ranks to uphold the Millennium Accord. Improvise, adapt, overcome.
Time to lock and load, boys. We fight with the best now. Let's do this.
Looking to bring their multiplayer magic to the next generation in a big way. Literally, the game was called Massive Action Game, which, dumb name aside, it was at least an accurate one. 256 players. That was the tagline for Sony's big new online multiplayer, and in 2010 it was definitely a big number. But that wasn't all it was. Behind the tagline, MAG was something new, something different on consoles, and something truly memorable. Announced at E3 2008, the game's ridiculous title was originally thought to be a placeholder by focus groups, who all assumed it would be the next entry in Zipper's Socom series, under the title Socom Shadow War. In the end, likely due to its lack of any single player campaign, it stuck with its own original IP, and abbreviated the Massive Action Game to MAG. Not much was said about MAG, beyond PlayStation President Jack Tretton describing the game as pushing the PS3 to breaking point, and that all-important tagline, 256 players. It seems strange today how impressive that amount of players was. After all, the standard for a battle royale today is at least a minimum of 100 players. But back in 2010, this number was unheard of. MAG even won a Guinness World Record for most players in a console shooter back in the day. It was this massive scale that MAG pretty much rode on leading up to its launch, and really it was all it needed. At this point, FPS fans were looking for the next big innovation, something different from the quick action deathmatch lobbies. I remember seeing MAG quite extensively in the lead up to its launch, with various YouTubers covering the game, and the marketing by Sony really drumming up hype. This was fairly impressive considering that MAG was an online-only game, with no single-player and always online requirements. That wasn't an easy sell back in the day, and games like Shadowrun have proven that not all players were interested in paying $60 for multiplayer. Plus, this was back when PSN was still a free service. We really took that for granted. MAG launched on the 26th of January 2010. Set in the year 2025, the game introduced players to the Shadow War, a global conflict between three private military corporations: the weirdly futuristic Raven, the generic Western Force Valor, and the guerrilla army that somehow had the best weapons in the game, Sever. Normally telling you the factions in the non-online FPS is as relevant as red bad, blue good, but in MAG it mattered, because the faction you picked when you first booted up the game is the one you have to stick with until you fully maxed out that faction. It was an interesting take, since not only were players limited to the guns of their faction, but also the map layouts and objectives. If you were a Valor player, you'll always be defending on the Valor map. Once you sign up for your team, you can only party up with other members of that team. It wasn't exactly great for the content of the game, but it was a unique way of inspiring team loyalty. Plus, PSN was free back then, so you could just make more accounts to play elsewhere, if you were a traitor. When I first bought my copy of MAG, I enlisted with Valor, which confirms that I'm extremely basic. After convincing a friend to buy the game, we showed true organisation skills when he enlisted in Sever, and then offered to pay me if I deleted my character and switched sides. Speaking of, if you're watching Sam, you owe me £1. In the end though, this switch was probably for the best. It was pretty much largely known in the game's early days that the People's Military of Sever were the best faction in the game. Getting into MAG then was interesting. The game had an old school feel. This wasn't the twitch shooting a lot of us are becoming accustomed to, and playing MAG was something of a learning experience. The game had a more tactical, methodical feel, and despite the big battles being the main selling point, for most players you wouldn't be seeing action in those fights straight away. Getting through training and having a few games against your faction mates in Suppression, players were greeted to their first taste of combat in the Sabotage and Acquisition modes. Sabotage was your basic Domination type with 64 players. It was a game mode I played the most in the early days. The other more unique game type of the two was Acquisition. On 128 player mode, that was a fun take on the capture the flag formula. The attacking team would work their way through the enemy team's defence in a bid to steal 2 armoured vehicles and bring them back to the base. Acquisition's a mode I always wish I'd played more of. Looking back, it had far more of the elements that made MAG unique. The map was littered with side objectives, such as enemy vehicle depots, defence placements and battery arrays. These various objectives made so much room for tactical choice on the battlefield, and this mode was also the first to truly open up the various command roles, which I'll talk about soon. Maybe it was the most heavy reliance on vehicles that kept me from engaging with it in the early days. I primarily cut my teeth on Sabotage. Moving through, I began to get acquainted with the game's progression system that attributed player class and guided them towards specific skills based on their playstyle. After finding out that players get double the experience for reviving players rather than killing them, I began to lean heavily towards medic skills. After my first few hours, I was ready to try the true meat of MAG. While most games are perhaps known for their list of modes, MAG's legacy was held in one specific mode, and to its credit, Domination was one hell of a mode to be remembered by. "128 player armies, 4 platoons, 16 squads, 8 objectives, 3 lines of defence, and half an hour." Domination wasn't just where the massive part of MAG's identity was on full display. This was the moment that true high-level, tactical first-person shooter gameplay landed on a console. MAG's Domination mode was something unseen, on a completely new scale. This was gameplay far beyond the 30v30 of Battlefield, the quick reflex gameplay of COD, and even the tactical strategy of Zipper's own Socom series. There are probably a lot of things about MAG that the gaming community has forgotten now, but for anyone who played it, this was something to remember. MAG's Domination games took place on maps the size of which many players had never seen before. You could play hundreds of games on the same map and still see new objectives and locations. Each time you dropped in, attacking Objective E was like playing a completely different map from attacking Objective A. Now, 128 players running around on one map sounds like chaos, and luckily Zipper Interactive knew this. This is where one of the best elements of MAG came into play, the command system. See, with Zipper's background in the tactical shooter genre, it was obvious that MAG would be more than just a run and gun style game. And despite the huge scale, the game lost none of the team's commitment to tactical gameplay. The team married the game's large scale with a pyramid-tiered command system. At the bottom you had your squad leaders, commanding 8-man teams and generally tasked with one objective. Squad leaders could call in airstrikes and issue XP boosts, boosting specific areas and objectives. For every 4 sets of squads was a platoon leader, in charge of a specific quarter of the map. These guys made sure all the squads were concentrating on the right objectives, issuing command bonuses to squad leaders, and specifying objectives to the squads under them. They also got to toy around with mortar strikes and calling in vehicles as perks of the job. And above all of them, the true commander Kane of the match was the OIC, Officer in Charge. Only players at max command level could opt for this role, and they had the easy, no pressure job of leading the entire 128 player attack or defense. This was a role players took seriously, and the ones who were put in these roles commanded some serious respect on the field when issuing commands. The command system was a separate leveling system, and players couldn't just walk into these roles. You had to prove yourself down at the bottom to work you up to the top. It probably goes without saying, considering how densely I've covered them, but these command roles were absolutely essential to the experience of playing Mag. And when they came together, when you joined a game with a clan, a serious OIC, and platoon leaders who listened to and issued commands, the experience of playing Domination was unlike anything else. Never before had I seen what true online warfare could be, what a series of interworking systems and teamwork could achieve. This was truly next-gen multiplayer at the time. The use of scale, command structures, multiple objectives, and players working together, Zipper took a risk with Mag. They asked players to do more than simply shoot and be rewarded, though you did a lot of that. It was something new. It was a shooter experience many on console were waiting for. Finally, players were given something deeper, and once you were invested, Mag offered endless hours of fun. I have countless memories and experiences playing Mag. The last minute pushes, shrewdly planned out victories, getting my first role as squad leader, and eventually platoon leader, though I never quite made it to IC. I have specific memories of games, like the time me and a friend became ultramedics. In front of a heavily armoured enemy fortification, our squad mates were parachuting in and struggling to make the push, and we ran through the field Hacksaw Ridge style,
Please, Lord, help me get one more.
getting up off our allies until they eventually managed to make the push. I remember playing one game under a platoon leader who issued commands in actual army code, ending every order with over and out and roger that. Taking the role so seriously, I half laughed and half loved that the game inspired such dedication. I remember the time one team were lagging behind on an objective, and our squad swooped in for the other side of the map to give them a boost. All the time we completely dominated a game, and with victory assured, all met up in the centre of the map to deliver a terrifying deathmatch of 80 players to the unsuspecting enemy team. I have so many memories tied to Mag that seem so integral to my gaming canon. The first time I switched PMC from Server to Raven, and felt like I was playing an entirely new game, seeing the maps I'd spent months attacking, flipped, and a list of new weapons and equipment. When I think of one game that defines the peak multiplayer experience of the 7th generation, it isn't the destruction of Battlefield, or the fast speed of Call of Duty, it's the tactics and scale of Mag. It personifies the PS3 era of multiplayer shooters for me. For many, Sony's console isn't remembered for multiplayer, it isn't remembered for the online offerings, yet for me, some of my all-time favourite multiplayer experiences were happening right here. Unfortunately, as with all good things, it wasn't built to last. After its launch in 2010, Mag enjoyed the moderate success of an online shooter that wasn't Call of Duty. It sold fairly well, totaling at 1.3 million copies. Not bad considering it was a console exclusive, online only game in the new IP. Its sales didn't deliver the Halo killer that Sony was after, and it wasn't about to make Mag a flagship title for the console. Mag still managed to build a pretty dedicated fanbase around its unique brand of large-scale tactical gameplay, and it luckily avoided the Lawbreaker's fate. Mag managed a fair turnout, and even up to its twilight years, getting into a game was rarely an issue. After its first year, Zipper supported the game with DLC, guns, maps and modes, updating the game fairly regularly, and this was before that kind of game service was required. The game's first major update was Interdiction, which was basically a fancy name for a new Domination mode. Its main unique feature being that any team could play any map. Interdiction suffered from the split player base of paid DLC, and its count dropped fairly quickly, leaving the mode largely forgotten. Luckily, Mag's second major update, Escalation, was far more interesting. Escalation brought all three major armies together on the battlefield for the first time. It was a similar objective-based mode, but had this interesting tug-of-war element, where 3 objectives are fought over by each team. The first to capture and hold 2 points open up to a 4. The team who cap the 2 points now must defend the 4th point, while the other 2 teams attack it. Once they cap the point, the objective resets, and the first team to fill a meter wins the battle. It was one of the more unique modes I've played, and the novelty of 3 armies fighting on one map gave the mode a feel that I haven't really seen replicated. Unfortunately, it was a mode I'd only get to enjoy for a brief time. A few months after it launched, my PS3 yellow lighted. By the time I'd finally gotten a replacement, interest in Mag was beginning to wane, both from shooter fans who were beginning to branch out, and even Zipper's fans, as they were gearing up for the long-awaited next entry in the Socom series, Socom 4. A lot of players were excited after the series' first 7th gen outing, developed by Slant 6, had left fans wanting. This would move Zipper's focus from MAG for the time being, but generally, the future for the game and the series still looked promising. Unfortunately, for a whole whirlwind of circumstances that probably deserved their own video, this release would spell the end for the studio. Riding on the success of MAG, and the excitement for the return of Socom, Zipper had all the cards at hand. Socom 4 officially launched on April 19, 2011, nearly a year after MAG. Early reviews for the game were decent, if a little lukewarm, with the game's score on Metacritic sitting at a mid-60 average. Though coming up to the game's launch, it was apparent that series fans were considerably less happy with the game. Many claimed it had dumbed down the mechanics of the earlier entries and strayed from the tactical gameplay of the originals, denouncing it as a poor imitation. Not that even the disappointed fans would get a chance to confirm these criticisms. Just a day before the game launched, PlayStation Network was hit with the biggest cyber attack in console history. Lasting 23 days, the cyber attack that exposed 77 million users' data brought Sony's online architecture to its knees, along with wiping a bunch of my trophy data. Seriously, did this happen to anyone else? It straight up wiped my Uncharted list. I was like 4 trophies from the platinum. This completely crippled the launch of Zipper's heavily online focused shooter, that ended up missing its key feature in what should have been the golden hours of its launch. This disaster of a launch set the game running with a broken leg, and unsurprisingly it was an injury the game couldn't really recover from. With the game failing to even break 1 million units by the time its online servers were shut down in January 2014. Unfortunately, the effect of Socom's failure would eventually leak beyond the franchise, with Sony beginning to realise that their focus was better suited to single player experiences. Zipper's designs fell out of focus. Though the studio managed one last effort in the form of the Vita launch title Unit 13, it was never going to be enough to bring the studio back, and in the same month its final project launched, the studio was shut down on March 29, 2012, with its 2 games currently in development cancelled, ending the multiplayer defining studio after 17 years in development. The ending chapter of Zipper and MAG's story is a sad and anticlimactic one. It was sad to see the studio that defined the PlayStation Online experience brought to such a sad and quiet end. MAG would follow its studio's demise in a similarly quiet and sad shutdown. Alongside its cousin series, MAG's servers would be officially shut down on January 28, 2014, ending the largest online shooter in the console's history, making the game forever unplayable. While writing this, I was curious if you could still buy a copy of the game anywhere, and yeah, CEX still sell the game for £4. Completely unusable, but if you really want to hold the case and cry, it's there. MAG's legacy as the biggest console shooter was held until the following year, when Sony Online Entertainment, now Daybreak, finally released PlanetSide 2 on PS4 in June 23, 2015. A game many fans held out hope for, hoping it would fill the void that MAG left behind. Personally, I didn't really connect with it. Maybe it was the setting, the impenetrable meta, or the 5-mile hike you had to take just to get to the action. But when I played it, all I could think was, man, I just miss MAG. And I mulled over those words over the following years. It was even part of the reason why I started this series. Remembering the tactical gameplay and full-scale conflicts of MAG, there just hasn't been a game that's captured that element since. The idea of a sequel or successor released today fills my mind with so many possibilities it's maddening. No limit to player counts, new technologies opening up new tactical opportunities. MAG on PS3, even in its ambitious state, felt like it was held back by the technical limitations of Sony's console. Things like deeper faction features, similar to those seen in more recent PC shooters, and persistent elements like the new live service games. In the trailers leading up to MAG's launch, Zipper kept making a point of an ongoing war, a consistent conflict that they wanted to be reflected in the game's world. At the time, that idea didn't really come to fruition for Zipper, but the philosophy behind it has gone on to inform a lot of the games of today, with the looter shooter and the ever-changing maps of Fortnite. The idea of MAG for the current gen, with the shared world aspect, could finally deliver the ongoing war that Zipper envisioned. There are so many possibilities to push what the multiplayer shooter could be with a MAG sequel. The bones and vital organs for something are right there. The problem with a MAG sequel isn't the how or why, but who. Looking at Sony's current crop of first-party studios, it's clear that the company is primarily focused on single-player experiences. Even previously multiplayer-focused developers like Guerrilla Games have pivoted to single-player with the success of Horizon Zero Dawn. It's obvious that the success of games like Uncharted, The Last of Us, Infamous and others have changed Sony's focus entirely on delivering single-player focused games, with games like Ghost of Tsushima, Death Stranding and The Last of Us 2. And honestly, that maybe isn't a bad thing for the company. Since its glory days on the PS2, Sony's undeniable mark on the industry has always shined strongest in their single-player offerings. And with last generation, they obviously realigned with that focus to pretty much full success on the PS4, with it leading the console market by a landslide. It was only during the company's weakest era that they put a heavier focus on multiplayer. With the PS3, the company scrambled to make online gaming their focus, and while this scramble ironically spawned a lot of unique experience that I've covered so far, there's no denying that the shift in focus was a bad one for the company. And that sort of brings me to the bittersweet element of the games on my Why I Miss series. A collection of games that wanted to try something, services and ideas that were wholly new, whether in their impressive scale, delivering something entirely new, or just something special. Most of all, the games that haven't been replicated since. They have found no equal or replacement in the years since, and nowhere is that more true than with MAG. I'm still waiting for the next level multiplayer experience, the next online shooter to understand the scale of war, to trust players with agency and tactics, to do more than what every shooter on the market is doing. MAG delivered a shooter experience unlike any other, and it's one that is lost in the current annals of gaming history. So I really outdid myself with the upload on this one. I think the video I uploaded before this was nearly a year between the last upload, and this one is pushing I think a year and a half. In the time since then, I'm pretty sure I've hit 2 big milestones with 100 subscribers and then 200 subscribers, and I haven't even been here for them. So yeah, a very belated thank you to anyone who subscribed. I really do appreciate it. This channel is a labour of love. Despite the low quality of some of the videos and audio, I spend a lot of time editing them, and they become quite all-consuming when I make them, which is probably part of the reason why I don't make them that often. But thanks for watching the video. I think I'm done pigeonholing myself as the guy who covers dead PS3 games at this point. I have another video lined up that I'm quite excited about. If any of my subscribers are Nier fans, that should be a fun one. But yeah, there won't be any promises on uploads. I gave up on that like 2 years ago now. I would like to upload on this channel more. It tends to be that this channel takes a backseat to things usually, but obviously with lockdown and finishing uni, I've had some time to just focus on creating a video or two. But yeah, thank you for subscribing, and thank you for watching the video. If there's any content you'd like to see from me, I would really appreciate suggestions, because I'm not entirely sure what to do with this channel going forward. But I guess I'll be part of the fun. So yeah, thanks for subscribing, or if you haven't subscribed, thank you for watching. A like would be appreciated. Subscribe if you want. I won't take up much space in the sub feed. And yeah, until next time, thanks for watching guys.